Well, what do you know? It's 6 in the morning, and we got some Forged in the Barrens card reveals to talk about. Starting off with Hunter's new legendary here, Barak Kodobane, a 5 mana 3/5 with a battle cry. Draw a 1/2 and 3 cost spell. So, sure enough, we got some Hunter card draw here, which is typically a fairly rare sight, and it's a lot of card draw. 3 cards being drawn here off the Kodobane. So this is like pretty reminiscent, I think, most recently of Ringmaster Watley for Warrior, a 5 mana 3/5 that draws you 3 cards. That's been a serviceable enough card. Barak Kodobane doing it a little distinct, though, because these are fixed cost cards, which can be advantageous because it can help you find very specific utility tools that fit a curve in your deck. So, for instance, you're on 7 mana, you need a bola shot. You play Barak Kodobane, you're pretty likely to get a bola shot if you built your deck for that purpose. Or maybe you're running some trackings and you just want to pull a tracking out of your deck at a 1 cost card. Perfect. Barak can allow you to do that. And then for 3 cost spells, Hunter did lose their most reliable ones in the standard format, at least, with both Animal Companion and Kill Command rotating out of the core set. But you can still imagine some great spells at the 3 cost spot as well. Now, here's the thing, right? This is a card I don't think is especially exciting to play on turn 5. Ringmaster Watley sort of has that same feel. Where, it's just a 3/5. You're not able to utilize these cards right away. Very rarely is that going to feel like an exciting play. It might just be kind of a stopgap play at the very best, which normally the way we've seen Hunter built and played historically, almost always, that's not really what they're looking to do, right? By the time they get to turn 5, they're looking to really develop more pressure and capitalize on the pressure they developed earlier in the game and start overwhelming the opponent and pushing really, really hard. And this is kind of a step back card. It's not a card that redevelops and repressures and puts them in trouble. This one kind of slows things down and plays for the future. So archetypically and characteristically speaking, this doesn't seem to complement Hunter very well. This feels like a card you're more excited to play late in the game as a sort of reload tool. But even then, like, the spells you're drawing, they can't be that enormously impactful because they're capped on their mana essentially, and you're paying this kind of 5 mana tax to get them in the first place. At a very base level, like, it's a solid body. It draws 3 cards. It has tutor effects. Those are all positives that are, working in this card's favor. But I still just have some questions on use cases and deck fits. To me, this is probably going to make the most sense in a slower Hunter deck, one that's like trying to do specific things, like maybe it's a lock and load Hunter because that's coming back in the core set, and this is just a way to tutor your lock and load and some spells to go with it. That's a possibility. It still doesn't seem like it's going to be great or compelling or the best version of Hunter, but you can see how this card carves out angles for itself. So, unless we see a big shift in the way Hunter is designed and played, which could be true. There's some indicative elements of the core set that suggest Hunter might be moving a little slower. That opens up angles for Barak Kodobane. But if Hunter is true to itself over the last 6 or 7 years or whatever, this is a card I don't think would fit especially well, but would probably be kind of nuts in other classes. Moving on here to the Morshan Elite, a 5 mana 4/4 for Warrior with a taunt and battle cry. If your hero attacked this turn, summon a copy of this. So this is basically like a Serenite Chain Gang of sorts, but like with a condition. Because you have to have attacked, and I'm sorry I'm looking away, I'm looking something up here real quick. You have to have attacked before this summons a copy. That said, I don't think that's going to be particularly hard, because if you look, this is 5 mana, and I think Warrior already has 2 really good 4 mana weapon development plays with Reaper's Scythe, a card we've seen some success with, and Sword Eater is a very, very natural fit on turn 4. Both of those are multiple durability weapons, so you equip them on 4 and attack, and then they're still ready to attack in many cases on turn 5 if they're not removed. So that's going to be easy. Attack, proc your Morshan Elite, and you get 2 4/4 taunts, which at a base level I think is solid. We've seen a few cards like this already, summoning a couple 4/4s. I think that's great, and it has taunt too, so this is a great way to play a little bit more defensively, force your opponent to deal with these things, so it's not like you're giving up a ton of like open face attacks or anything along the way. Now, on top of that, note that this is like Serenite Chain Gang, which means it's a copy of this, which means if you buff this in hand, it's a taunt minion. We've seen all this hand buff stuff for Warrior. You could summon a buffed copy. So we have like Feet of Strength in Madness of the Dark Moon Fair that gives a taunt minion in hand +5/+5. You play that on 3, you play your weapon on 4. If you play Sword Eater, it's also got taunt, so maybe it hits the Sword Eater. You got some risk there, but maybe you play Reaper Sight instead, or some new weapon we haven't even seen. And then on 5, maybe you have a 9/9 Morshan Elite, and you summon a copy of a 9/9 Morshan Elite instead of a 4/4. And if there's any other hand buff stuff that pops up, that's a great way to duplicate all of those buffs, essentially, on your Morshan Elite. So I think that's a really intriguing angle as well. I felt like there's been multiple times we had hand buff taunt warrior like close to feeling tier 4 or tier 3, you know, like winnable but not great, and it needed cards to get it over the hump. And I'm intrigued about Morshan Elite here. I think it might be that card that gets it over the hump. So I think it actually makes sense even outside of that environment. Just a couple 4/4 taunts on curve, that's solid, and then it's also got this upside that could do even more crazy stuff. So this card is kind of crazy, I think. The Light Shower Elemental, a 6/6 elemental for Priest with Taunt and Death Rattle, restore 8 health to all friendly characters. That is a big heal and a pretty big taunt as well. And Death Rattle synergies and Elemental synergies, which means like maybe N'Zoth synergies on this one. I think this card's really cool. It feels like a fantastic minion for a slower, grindier, controllier priest deck, particularly any sort of resurrect style effects. Bringing this back, it feels like it's going to be awesome. And the cool thing about this compared to some of the other like annoying Death Rattle, taunt, priest stuff, think like Convincing Infiltrator, is that when you do bring this card back, it's going to have a ton of counter pressure as a 6/6. It's going to be hitting face really hard if your opponent doesn't deal with it. So hopefully it allows you to end games and create more lethal threats on the back of all these stats. So yeah, I mean, I could definitely see this card popping into any kind of grindy priest that's rezzing stuff, that's playing off of taunts. And let's not downplay the importance of this heal, right? So if your opponent deals with the Light Shower Elemental, they push through this 6/6 taunt, then boom, they heal you for 8, and that's awesome. And it's not just healing you, it's healing other minions as well. Now, I don't think that's usually going to make a big impact. If you're spending 6 mana, this is often going to be one of the only things you do. You may not have a board sticking around necessarily, but occasionally that could create some problems where, you know, in the late game, it's turn 15, you had an 8/8 on board, it took some damage. You play this and your opponent's like, I need to kill that 8/3 or whatever it is before I kill the Light Shower. I'm going to heal it up. But because it has taunt, they might have to kill the Light Shower first, heal whatever other leftover minion you kind of had lingering behind. There's also some healing synergy stuff. We got the Light Steed that like gives health when things get healed. So there might be some synergies there. I don't really see that lining up necessarily. It's going to be hard to make all that work from a mana cost and commitment standpoint. But nonetheless, you don't need it to necessarily, right? If it hits face and you play a 6/6 taunt and you get to res this, you get to N'Zoth this, you get to do whatever with it, I think that might just be enough for a card like this to be great. And we've seen like Paladin already use the elemental 6/6 taunt weapon, Hammer of the Naru, I believe it's called. And that 6/6 body feels good. And I think this one will feel just as good as well. There will be scenarios where this is fine. Keep in mind, Priest can also do things like discount this as well with Nazmani Bloodweaver, so it might come down even sooner. All in all, it's just a big pile of stuff, a big pile of defensive stuff, and that's what Priest really, really likes. So I think Light Shower Elemental will make perfect sense for the class and certainly see some play. And it might be frustrating, but I don't think it's quite as frustrating as like Convincing Infiltrator or those sorts of things. So this almost feels like a more fun, healthier version of Res Priest of old if I see this card. I also just think it's really cool looking, the Elemental. So I think I'll be okay if this one becomes really, really good. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see. All right. So next up here is Condemn, the new Priest ranked spell, which also means I think we're going to get a look here at our first look at our Priest mercenary character. Looks like a Draenei Priest of some kind. And this is a 2-mana holy spell, and it reads deal 1 damage to all enemy minions. And this upgrades when you have 5 mana, dealing 2 damage, and it'll upgrade again when you get to 10 mana, dealing 3 damage to all enemy minions. So pretty cool, cheap little AoE card here. Now, I will say at a base level, I don't think this card's that exciting compared to stuff we've seen in the past. Think about cards like Maelstrom Portal, right? That gave you a minion and dealt 1 damage to all enemy minions. So I don't know how often Priest is going to use that very successfully at a base level. They don't have great follow-ups. There's not a lot of like spell damage utilization in Priest necessarily. It just doesn't feel like a good place. I think you're always going to be waiting to 5 mana to feel like this card's interesting, at which point it becomes a pretty cheap, consecration sort of effect. Of course, only minions, but you get the idea. And even then, it's still not quite like Holy Nova equivalent because it doesn't heal you, but it's only 2 mana. So you can slot it into turns really easily and still develop some other stuff. So I think it becomes pretty interesting at 5. There will still be instances where dealing that 2 damage matters. We see that now with like Lightning Breath and Holy Nova. They're often great on curve at their true mana cost, but they're usually fine in the late game as well. And then when you get to 10 mana for this one, it's, again, pretty solid. Keep in mind the costs are staying the same, right? So it's always going to be really flexible. Just throw it in your turn while you're doing something else. And I think at both the 5 and 10 minute increments, this becomes an intriguing AoE card. Now, that said, is it big enough? Because, if you're reacting to a board on 5, 6, 7 mana, you don't always want to deal 2 damage. Sometimes you need that Soul Mirror level card instead. And this is going to take up a draw, and it's going to be in hand, and it's going to be chilling for a while, and that's a little bit risky. Of course, once you top deck it, if you're at 5 mana, it's going to be naturally upgraded. That's fine, but it's still not packing a ton of punch. So the flexibility and the efficiency of the mana cost still don't really increase or increment the value of this card. And Priest sometimes does rely on value, particularly because they've been light on card draw in the past. And they've complemented that with card generation through things like Sethic Veilweaver, but this doesn't interact with a card like Sethic Veilweaver. So it does feel like this could fall in a gap a little bit where it's not enough value. The efficiency isn't relevant because you're emptying your hand so readily anyway that this just doesn't make sense or doesn't line up with the Priest game plan. But it is also a cheap spell, and cheap spells have other synergies beyond that. Things like Nazmani Bloodweaver. This could be a great way to trigger your Bloodweaver in the late game to discount other stuff. Now, all that said, I think what'll happen with this card is it'll be fine. It'll feel okay, but it won't make many deck cuts. It'll be tossed aside in favor of other cheap spells or other more directed cards or higher value cards instead. And it'll be awesome when you randomly generate it. You get it off of something, you're going to feel super duper pumped. But most of the time, you won't actually be running it in your deck. All right, so next up here is Sigil of Flame, and this is apparently a new mechanic for Demon Hunters. Apparently, this won't be the only Sigil that we see, based on what we saw from Celestalon on Twitter. It's a 2-mana spell, and it reads, at the start of your next turn, deal 3 damage to all minions. So this is sort of like a secret, but it's a secret that's not secret. In other words, we're told when you play this, it's going to go on your hero portrait like a secret or a quest. It'll be visible to both players, and then, of course, it's just going to proc at the start of your next turn. So it's kind of cool in that regard, right? It's almost like a warning to your opponent. It's like, hey, dude, you play stuff that's 3 health or less, and it's gonna get killed. It's gonna die because I have this Sigil. So in some ways that could be really good, right? Where it's like, oh man, they have Sigil of Flame. I don't want to play my 3/3s down, and this works almost kind of like a Doomsayer, where you tempo a Doomsayer just to discourage your opponent from playing stuff because they didn't want it to just die to the Doomsayer. Sigil of Flame, I think in many instances will operate exactly like that. Now, on the other hand, because this isn't a secret, they may just say, okay, cool, I'll just wait a turn, man, or I'll play my 4 health thing, or I'll just draw cards this turn instead of playing some 3 health minions, or I'll rely on battle cries this turn so that I don't have to sacrifice all my stats on board. So they can kind of play around your Sigil of Flame if their hand or deck allows them to do that. Now, I think in many instances there will be decks that aren't able to successfully play around Sigil of Flame, and this creates a really cool that Doomsayer anti-tempo turn where you slow down your opponent a ton for only 2 mana, because 2 mana deal 3 to all is fantastic. That's just a really good effect. Clearly a great cheap board clear. Now it is delayed, so if they already have some 3/3s on board, they're going to be able to hit you when you pass the turn back to them, so you might take some damage to set up for that future clear. So that's a downside compared to just a direct removal card, clearly. And this does hit all minions, so you might be impacting your own stuff on board as well. So if you had like a 3/3 when you played this, normally your opponent might kill that 3/3, but if they know the Sigil of Flame's going to go off, they can just go face, ignore your 3/3 because they know it's going to get killed in the Sigil of Flame. So a lot of stuff here to consider for Sigil of Flame. And frankly, without having really seen a card like this in the past, it's kind of hard to guess exactly what it's going to do. But here's what I'll say. I think it creates a lot of friction, much like those Doomsayer turns. I think it's clearly very mana efficient. Dealing 3 to all minions for 2 mana is a really, really efficient sort of play. It has things like Flame Ward feel a little bit as well, right? And Flame Ward's been a great card. So at the end of the day, I do think this card's doing enough, and it will probably be a hard card to deal with in many cases. Now, there is one whole other bigger question here, perhaps, which is, will Demon Hunter care about a card like this? Is Demon Hunter going to remain a deck that's on the the front end of things and pushing the pressure and dealing the damage and forcing their opponents to react, as opposed to being the reactionary class on their back foot? And I think that's a bigger risk for Sigil of Flame, at the very least in the short term. It seems like, aggressive Demon Hunters and Soul Fragment Demon Hunter that's pushing face really hard is probably going to be the way to go, and Sigil of Flame is going to feel like a card that doesn't really synergize with that game plan. So we're going to need to see Demon Hunter slow down and move into a control game plan for a card like this to make sense. There's also this Death Rattle thing that kind of got teased for Demon Hunter, and technically Sigil of Flame sort of works well with Death Rattles if you're killing off your own minions. So it's something to keep in mind. I don't really see that coming together either, but maybe a synergy that pops up from time to time. So all in all, a good card in a lot of ways. Maybe not the best fit right now, but definitely one I think has potential. And if we see other sigils, this could be a fun little package for Demon Hunter in a slower, more reactive control environment. All right, moving on here to a neutral card, the Horde Operative, a 3-mana 3/4, my favorite stat line. And Battle Cry, copy your opponent's secrets and put them into play. So pretty intriguing secret tech card here. We always have a handful of these pop into Hearthstone. And with this one, instead of removing the secrets, you're just going to copy them and put them into play. So, if your opponent has like 2, 3, 4 secrets up, this is clearly an insanely high tempo play. Getting, anywhere from, 5 to 10 mana of secrets for free, basically. That could be a big swing, right? And in some cases, it could technically be better than even just removing your opponent's secrets, because you're creating a lot of problems for them. And usually you play these and you pass it back to your opponent. So if you don't proc the secrets with your Horde Operative, then in many cases, your opponent's got a lot on their plate to deal with. Now, of course, they will know the secrets, which is a big downside, because they might just be able to play around them or negate them really, really effectively, because they're aware of what the secrets are, because they already played them. That's a risk. They also just might have a deck that's not great at answering secrets. It doesn't have a lot of flexibility. It's very specific to a secret build or something. So they don't have a lot of ways to manipulate those secrets in action, particularly their own secrets against them. I will say one problem with this one is that, if you think about cards like Ice Barrier or even Ice Block out in Wild, sometimes removing the secret is really important because it enabled you to end the game. And this doesn't really change the game state. So it kind of just delays it and shifts the impetus to your opponent. So I think it does lose some potential utility in that regard. I'll also just say that secret techs in standard format really haven't been great cards historically. So even though this is a really neat design, and I think it holds up comparatively to other secret tech cards just haven't been something we've run. Weapon tech shows up in Hearthstone all the time, but secret tech just hasn't been consistent or reliable enough because there aren't quite enough secret techs to make it worth it. Now, that said, we have some hints of Secret Paladin. We have some hints of Secret Mage. We still have Shadow Jeweler Hanar and Secrets in Rogue. So maybe the secret density in the meta is going to be higher than ever, which gives us a little chance to succeed. But ultimately, I suspect, much like in the past, secret tech just won't be worth it Barak Kodobane is a 3-star card. Sigil of Flame is a 3-star card. Morshan Elite is a 4-star card. Horde Operative is a 2-star card. Light Shower Elemental is a 4-star card. Condemn is a 2-star card. So there you go. Review number 4 is down. Of course, I want to hear your thoughts on all these cards. Is Condemn better than I think? Is Hunter going to be broken with card draw? Share those takes and more in the comments. But until then, thanks much for watching. And until next time, game on.